Ali versus Frazier, when heroes become enemies. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier should have been allies. Both were heavyweight champions. Both were proud black men fighting during the civil rights era, and both had overcome incredible odds to reach the top of their sport. Instead, they became the most bitter enemies in boxing history. The hatred started with words. Ali, stripped of his title for refusing military service, needed to rebuild his career. Frazier, who had supported Ali during his exile and even lent him money, expected gratitude. Instead, Ali launched a psychological warfare campaign that was as brutal as anything that happened in the ring. "Joe Frazier is too ugly to be champion," Ali would say. "He's an Uncle Tom. He's the white man's champion." These weren't just promotional tactics. Ali genuinely seemed to believe that Frazier represented everything he was fighting against. Frazier, a proud man who had grown up in poverty and earned everything through hard work, was devastated by Ali's attacks. "He called me ignorant," Frazier said years later, his voice still filled with pain. "That hurt more than any punch he ever threw." Their first fight at Madison Square Garden in 1971 was billed as the fight of the century, and it lived up to the hype. Both men were undefeated. Both had legitimate claims to being the true heavyweight champion. The winner would be undisputed. For 15 rounds, they beat each other senseless. Ali's speed and boxing skills against Frazier's relentless pressure and devastating left hook. In the 15th round, Frazier landed a left hook that sent Ali crashing to the canvas. The first time the great Muhammad Ali had ever been knocked down in a professional fight. Frazier won by unanimous decision, but both men paid a terrible price. Ali's jaw was so swollen he couldn't speak for days. Frazier's face was so battered he was hospitalized for weeks. Their rematch in 1974 was less dramatic but more vicious. Ali won a close decision, setting up the trilogy fight that would become the most famous boxing match in history. The Thriller in Manila, boxing's greatest war. October 1st, 1975, the Araneta Coliseum in Quezon City, Philippines. 125-degree heat. Two men who genuinely hated each other, fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world. The Thriller in Manila wasn't just a fight. It was a war of attrition that pushed both men beyond the limits of human endurance. For 14 rounds, Ali and Frazier traded punches with an intensity that bordered on the supernatural. Ali started fast, using his jab and movement to build an early lead, but Frazier kept coming, his left hook finding its target again and again. By the middle rounds, both men were exhausted, but neither would give an inch. "It was like death," Ali said later, "closest thing to dying that I know of." In the later rounds, the fight became a test of wills. Ali's face was swollen and cut. Frazier's eyes were nearly closed from the punishment. The heat was so intense that both men were dehydrated and running on pure adrenaline. After the 14th round, Frazier's corner stopped the fight. His eyes were swollen shut, and he couldn't see Ali coming at him anymore. Ali had won, but he was so exhausted he couldn't get off his stool for the victory celebration. "I didn't think I could fight anymore," Ali admitted. "I thought about quitting too." The Thriller in Manila broke both men. Ali was never the same fighter afterward, and Frazier's career effectively ended that night. But it gave boxing its greatest moment, a fight so brutal and beautiful that it transcended sport and became art. George Foreman, the wild card. George Foreman entered this rivalry as the destroyer, the young, powerful champion who seemed unstoppable. His knockout of Joe Frazier in 1973 was so devastating that it changed the entire dynamic of heavyweight boxing. Foreman didn't just beat Frazier, he demolished him. 2 knockdowns in the first round, 4 more in the second. The man who had beaten Muhammad Ali was suddenly a broken fighter, and Foreman was the new boogeyman of the heavyweight division. This set up the most unlikely upset in boxing history. Ali versus Foreman in Zaire, 1974, the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali was a 4-1 underdog against Foreman, and for good reason. Foreman had knocked out 37 of his 40 opponents. He hit harder than anyone in the division. At 25, he was 8 years younger than Ali and seemingly in his prime. But Ali had a plan. Instead of dancing and moving as everyone expected, he leaned against the ropes and let Foreman punch himself out. The rope-a-dope strategy was born out of desperation, but it worked perfectly. For 7 rounds, Foreman threw bombs while Ali covered up and whispered in his ear, "Is that all you got, George?" They told me you could hit harder than that. In the eighth round, with Foreman exhausted from throwing power shots, Ali struck. A perfect combination dropped Foreman to the canvas, and the count reached 10 before the stunned champion could get up. Ali had reclaimed his title in the most dramatic fashion possible, and the three-way rivalry between Ali, Frazier, and Foreman had given boxing its greatest era. The Sugar Wars: Leonard versus Hearns versus Duran versus Hagler. The 1980s belonged to the Four Kings: Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, and Marvelous Marvin Hagler. These four welterweight and middleweight champions created a round-robin of rivalries that produced some of the most technically brilliant and emotionally charged fights in boxing history. Leonard versus Duran. Hands of Stone meets Sugar. Roberto Duran was everything Sugar Ray Leonard wasn't. Where Leonard was smooth and charismatic, Duran was rough and intimidating. Where Leonard was the Olympic golden boy, Duran was the street fighter from Panama who had clawed his way to the top. Their first fight in Montreal in 1980 was a clash of styles and cultures. Duran, moving up from lightweight, was supposed to be too small for Leonard. Instead, he turned the fight into a phone booth brawl and outworked the younger champion. Manos de Piedra, Hands of Stone, lived up to his nickname, pressuring Leonard for 15 rounds and winning a unanimous decision to capture the welterweight title. It was Leonard's first professional loss, and it shattered his aura of invincibility. But the rematch 5 months later gave boxing one of its most controversial moments. In the eighth round, with Leonard boxing beautifully and building a clear lead, Duran suddenly turned to the referee and said, "No mas, no more." Duran quit. The proud warrior, who had never backed down from anyone, simply stopped fighting and walked away. To this day, the reasons remain unclear. Duran claimed stomach cramps, but many believed he was simply frustrated by Leonard's boxing clinic. The No Mas fight became one of the most infamous moments in boxing history, and it haunted Duran for the rest of his career. Leonard had gotten his revenge in the most unexpected way possible. Leonard versus Hearns, the war. If Leonard versus Duran was about pride and culture, Leonard versus Hearns was about pure boxing artistry. Thomas Hitman Hearns was a 6 feet 1 inch welterweight with a 78-inch reach and knockout power in both hands. Leonard was the smaller, faster boxer with superior ring IQ. Their 1981 fight was billed as The Showdown, and it delivered one of the greatest welterweight fights ever. For 13 rounds, they traded moments of brilliance. Hearns used his reach and power to build an early lead, while Leonard's speed and combinations kept him in the fight. In the 13th round, with Leonard behind on the scorecards, he launched a desperate assault that nearly finished Hearns. A left hook staggered the hitman, and Leonard poured on the punishment until the referee stopped the fight. But Leonard paid a price for his victory. The punishment he absorbed from Hearns contributed to the detached retina that forced him into temporary retirement. When he came back, he was never quite the same fighter. Their rematch in 1989 was equally dramatic, but in a different way. Leonard, coming out of retirement after 5 years, fought Hearns to a controversial draw that many felt Hearns deserved to win. The fight proved that even past their primes, these two warriors could still create magic. And subscribing is like magic for us. Hagler versus Hearns, 3 rounds of fury. Marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns in 1985 lasted only 3 rounds, but those 3 rounds contained more action and drama than most fights see in 12. From the opening bell, both men threw caution to the wind. Hearns, moving up to middleweight, tried to end the fight early with his power. Hagler, the champion, met him in the center of the ring and traded bombs. The first round was so violent that many observers called it the greatest round in boxing history. Both men landed devastating shots. Both men were hurt. Both men kept coming forward. In the third round, Hagler finally broke through. A right hand opened a cut on Hearns' forehead, and the blood began flowing into his eyes. Hagler pressed his advantage, landing a barrage of punches that forced the referee to stop the fight. 3 rounds, 8 minutes of fighting, a lifetime of memories. Hagler versus Leonard, the controversial classic. The final chapter of the Four Kings saga came in 1987 when Sugar Ray Leonard came out of retirement to challenge Marvelous Marvin Hagler for the middleweight title. Hagler had been the undisputed champion for 7 years, defending his title 12 times. Leonard hadn't fought in 3 years. The fight was a chess match between two masters. Hagler pressed forward with his traditional stalking style, while Leonard used movement, flurries, and ring generalship to steal rounds. For 12 rounds, they battled in what many consider one of the most technically brilliant fights ever. Leonard won a split decision that remains controversial to this day. Many felt Hagler had done enough to retain his title, but Leonard's flashier style and late-round rallies impressed the judges. The decision was so controversial that it effectively ended Hagler's career. The proud champion, disgusted by what he saw as a robbery, retired immediately and never fought again. The classic heavyweights, Holmes versus Norton and Holmes versus Cooney. While Ali, Frazier, and Foreman dominated the 1970s, the early 1980s belonged to Larry Holmes and his rivalries with Ken Norton and Jerry Cooney. Holmes versus Norton, the passing of the torch. Larry Holmes versus Ken Norton was more than just a heavyweight title fight. It was the symbolic passing of the torch from one era to another. Norton, the former Marine who had broken Muhammad Ali's jaw, represented the old guard. Holmes, the sharp jabbing technician from eastern Pennsylvania, represented the future. Their 1978 fight was an epic 15-round war that showcased everything great about heavyweight boxing. Norton's awkward style and granite chin against Holmes's superior boxing skills and devastating jab. For 14 rounds, the fight was dead even. Norton's pressure and body shots against Holmes's jab and combinations. Both men were exhausted, both were hurt, but neither would give an inch. In the 15th round, Holmes found another gear. A series of combinations staggered Norton, and Holmes poured on the punishment to win a unanimous decision and capture the WBC heavyweight title. The fight established Holmes as the new heavyweight king and effectively ended Norton's championship aspirations. It was a changing of the guard that happened in the most dramatic way possible. Holmes versus Cooney, the Great White Hope. Larry Holmes versus Jerry Cooney in 1982 was about more than boxing. It was about race, media hype, and the eternal search for the Great White Hope in heavyweight boxing. Cooney, a powerful left hooker from Long Island, had been built up by the media as the white fighter who could dethrone the black champion. The racial undertones were impossible to ignore, and they added an extra layer of tension to an already compelling matchup. Holmes, meanwhile, was tired of living in Muhammad Ali's shadow and being disrespected despite his obvious skills. The Cooney fight was his chance to prove he was a legitimate champion in his own right. The fight lived up to its billing. For 13 rounds, Holmes and Cooney traded bombs in front of a raucous crowd at Caesar's Palace. Cooney's left hook troubled Holmes early, but the champion's superior conditioning and boxing skills gradually took over. In the 13th round, Holmes dropped Cooney with a right hand and the fight was stopped. Holmes had successfully defended his title and silenced his critics, at least temporarily. The Holmes-Cooney rivalry represented the last great heavyweight rivalry of the pre-Mike Tyson era, and it showed that boxing could still capture the public's imagination when the stakes were high enough. The Mexican Wars, Barrera versus Morales, and Vasquez versus Marquez. Mexico has always been a hotbed of boxing talent, and the country has produced some of the sport's greatest rivalries. Two feuds stand out above all others. Barrera versus Morales, the Civil War. Eric Morales versus Marco Antonio Barrera was more than just a boxing rivalry. It was a civil war that divided Mexico and gave us 3 of the greatest featherweight fights ever. Morales was from Tijuana, the flashy boxer with movie star looks and technical brilliance. Barrera was from Mexico City, the warrior who would walk through fire to win a fight. Their styles were perfectly matched, and their personalities were perfectly opposed. Their first fight in 2000 was a coming-out party for both men. Morales won a close decision, but both fighters proved they belonged among the elite. The fight was a technical masterpiece that showcased the best of Mexican boxing: skill, heart, and an unwillingness to take a backward step. The rematch in 2002 was even better. Barrera got his revenge with a unanimous decision victory that many considered the fight of the year. This time, Barrera's pressure and body shots wore down Morales, proving that he could adjust his style and overcome adversity. But it was their trilogy fight in 2004 that cemented their legacy. By then, both men were past their primes, but they still had enough left to produce a classic. Barrera won another close decision, but the real winners were the fans who got to witness 3 fights that showcased everything beautiful about boxing. The Barrera-Morales rivalry proved that you didn't need heavyweight power or massive pay-per-view numbers to create boxing magic. Sometimes all you needed was 2 proud fighters who refused to back down. Vasquez versus Marquez, the bantamweight ballet. Israel Vasquez versus Rafael Marquez gave us 4 fights that redefined what bantamweight boxing could be. These weren't just fights, they were wars of attrition that pushed both men to their absolute limits. Their first fight in 2007 was an instant classic. Vasquez's pressure and power against Marquez's boxing skills and counterpunching. Both men were dropped, both men were hurt, but neither will. Create voiceover, copy, retry, Gonzalo, finish it, Poppy, Claude 4 Sonnet, Vasquez versus Marquez, the bantamweight ballet. Israel Vasquez versus Rafael Marquez gave us 4 fights that redefined what bantamweight boxing could be. These weren't just fights, they were wars of attrition that pushed both men to their absolute limits. Their first fight in 2007 was an instant classic. Vasquez's pressure and power against Marquez's boxing skills and counterpunching. Both men were dropped, both men were hurt, but neither would quit. Vasquez won a split decision, but the fight was so good that a rematch was inevitable. The second fight 6 months later was even more brutal. This time, Marquez got his revenge, stopping Vasquez in the 6th round after a war that left both men battered and bloodied. The violence was so intense that many observers wondered if either man would be the same again. Their third encounter in 2008 was the most dramatic of all. Vasquez, fighting with a badly damaged right eye that would eventually end his career, showed incredible heart in winning a split decision. The image of Vasquez, his eye nearly closed, celebrating his victory, became one of boxing's most iconic moments. The fourth and final fight in 2010 was a sad epilogue to a great rivalry. Both men were clearly past their primes, and Marquez won a lopsided decision. But by then, they had already given boxing fans 4 fights that will be remembered forever. The Vasquez-Marquez rivalry proved that the smaller weight classes could produce drama and excitement equal to any heavyweight bout. Their 4 fights combined technical skill with raw courage in a way that few rivalries have ever matched. The modern classics: Ward vs. Gatti, Corrales vs. Castillo, and Pacquiao vs. Marquez. The 2000s gave us several rivalries that proved boxing's capacity for creating instant classics and long-term feuds. Ward versus Gatti, heart versus skill. Arturo Gatti was never supposed to beat Mickey Ward. The Irish-American boxer from Lowell, Massachusetts, was a journeyman who had lost several big fights. Gatti was the flashy puncher from New Jersey with the better record and the bigger reputation, but Ward had something Gatti didn't expect: a left hook to the body that could drop a bull and the heart of a warrior who would never quit. Their first fight in 2002 was an instant classic. Ward's body shots broke down Gatti's defense, while Gatti's power shots kept Ward honest. In the 9th round, Ward landed a left hook to the liver that dropped Gatti to his knees. Somehow, Gatti got up and finished the fight, but Ward had won a unanimous decision. The rematch 6 months later was even better. This time, Gatti adjusted his strategy and outboxed Ward to win a majority decision. But the real story was the mutual respect that had developed between the two warriors. Their trilogy fight in 2003 was the perfect ending to a perfect rivalry. Gatti won another close decision, but both men had given so much of themselves that they could barely stand at the final bell. The Ward-Gatti trilogy proved that sometimes the best rivalries come from the most unexpected places. 2 fighters who were never considered elite gave boxing 3 fights that will be remembered forever. Corrales versus Castillo, lightning in a bottle. Diego Corrales versus José Luis Castillo produced only one fight, but that one fight was so spectacular that it deserves mention among boxing's greatest rivalries. Their 2005 lightweight unification bout started as a technical boxing match but evolved into an all-out war. In the 10th round, Castillo dropped Corrales twice with devastating left hooks. Each time, Corrales got up and continued fighting. With less than a minute left in the round, Corrales launched a desperate comeback. A straight right hand dropped Castillo, and Corrales poured on the punishment until the referee stopped the fight. It was one of the greatest comebacks in boxing history, compressed into a single round of fighting. The rematch was good but couldn't match the drama of their first encounter. Tragically, Corrales died in a motorcycle accident in 2007, cutting short what could have been a legendary rivalry. Pacquiao versus Marquez, the eternal question. Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez gave us 4 fights over 9 years, and fans are still debating who really won their rivalry. Their first fight in 2004 was a classic that ended in a controversial draw. Marquez was dropped 3 times in the first round, but showed incredible heart in coming back to earn the draw. Many felt Marquez had done enough to win, but the knockdowns cost him on the scorecards. The rematch in 2008 was just as close, with Pacquiao winning a split decision that many observers felt should have gone to Marquez. The Mexican's counterpunching and ring generalship seemed to outweigh Pacquiao's flashier moments. Their third fight in 2011 was another razor-close decision that went to Pacquiao, again by majority decision. By this point, the rivalry had taken on a life of its own, with fans and media divided on who was really winning these fights. The fourth and final fight in 2012 provided the most definitive ending possible. After 5 rounds of typical back-and-forth action, Marquez landed a perfect counter right hand that knocked Pacquiao unconscious. It was one of the most dramatic knockouts in boxing history, and finally gave Marquez the emphatic victory he had been seeking. The Pacquiao-Marquez rivalry showcased the beauty of boxing's scoring system and the subjective nature of judging close fights. Their 4 encounters prove that sometimes the best rivalries are built on controversy and unresolved questions. The British Wars, Ben versus Eubank and Froch versus Groves. British boxing has produced some memorable rivalries, with 2 standing out as particularly significant. Ben versus Eubank class warfare. Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank was about more than boxing. It was about class, personality, and 2 completely different approaches to the sport. Ben was the dark destroyer, the working-class warrior from London who fought with raw aggression and knockout power. Eubank was the eccentric showman who spoke with an affected accent and carried a walking stick to press conferences. Their first fight in 1990 was a brutal affair that ended with Eubank stopping Ben in the 9th round to win the WBO middleweight title. The fight was so violent that both men were hospitalized afterward. Their rematch in 1993 was equally dramatic but ended in a controversial draw. Many felt Ben had done enough to win, but Eubank retained his WBO super middleweight title. The draw only intensified their rivalry and left fans wanting a decisive third fight that never came. The Ben-Eubank rivalry captured the British public's imagination in a way that few boxing matches had before or since. Their contrasting personalities and genuine dislike for each other created a feud that transcended sport and became part of British popular culture. Froch versus Groves, the Wembley explosion. Carl Froch versus George Groves gave British boxing one of its biggest moments when they fought in front of 80,000 fans at Wembley Stadium in 2014. Their first fight in 2013 had ended controversially when referee Howard Foster stopped the fight in the 9th round with Groves ahead on the scorecards but hurt from a Froch combination. Many felt the stoppage was premature, setting up a rematch that captured the British public's imagination. The rematch at Wembley was everything British boxing could have hoped for. In front of the largest crowd for a boxing match in British history, Froch landed a devastating right hand in the 8th round that knocked Groves out cold. The knockout was so spectacular and the setting so dramatic that it became one of the defining moments in British boxing history. The image of Groves falling backward from Froch's right hand with 80,000 fans on their feet became iconic. The Puerto Rican pride, Trinidad versus De La Hoya. Felix Trinidad versus Oscar de la Hoya represented a clash of cultures and styles that captivated the boxing world in 1999. De la Hoya was the golden boy, the Olympic champion who had become boxing's biggest star. Trinidad was the Puerto Rican power puncher who had never lost a professional fight. Their welterweight unification bout was one of the most anticipated fights of the decade. For 11 rounds, De La Hoya boxed beautifully, using his speed and movement to outpoint Trinidad. But in the 12th round, Trinidad's power finally told. A series of combinations hurt De La Hoya and swung the fight in Trinidad's favor. Trinidad won a majority decision in one of the most controversial verdicts in boxing history. Many felt De La Hoya had done enough to win, but Trinidad's late rally impressed the judges. The fight showcased the eternal boxing debate between boxing and punching, between technique and power. It also highlighted the importance of finishing strong in close fights. The heavyweight modern era, Lewis versus Holyfield and Fury versus Wilder. The modern heavyweight division has produced two significant rivalries that captured global attention. Lewis versus Holyfield. The undisputed question, Lennox Lewis versus Evander Holyfield, was about determining the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Their first fight in 1999 ended in a controversial draw that most observers felt Lewis had won clearly. The rematch 8 months later was less controversial, but equally significant. Lewis won a unanimous decision to become the undisputed heavyweight champion, ending the era of multiple title holders that had plagued the division for years. The Lewis-Holyfield rivalry represented the last time the heavyweight division had a truly undisputed champion until the current era. Fury versus Wilder, the trilogy of destruction. Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder gave us 3 fights that showcased everything dramatic about modern heavyweight boxing. Their first fight in 2018 ended in a controversial draw after Fury survived 2 knockdowns, including a devastating 12th round knockdown that many thought had ended the fight. Fury's ability to get up from Wilder's right hand became one of boxing's most memorable moments. The rematch in 2020 was completely different. Fury dominated from the opening bell, dropping Wilder twice before his corner threw in the towel in the 7th round. The performance established Fury as the division's top fighter. Their trilogy fight in 2021 was the most dramatic of all. Fury was dropped in the 4th round, but came back to knock Wilder down twice in the 10th and once more in the 11th to end the fight. The back-and-forth nature of the contest made it an instant classic. The Fury-Wilder trilogy proved that heavyweight boxing could still capture the public's imagination when the personalities and stakes were right. The eternal question, what makes a great rivalry? Looking at these rivalries, certain patterns emerge. The greatest boxing rivalries share several key elements. Contrasting styles, Ali's speed versus Frazier's pressure, Leonard's boxing versus Hearns's power, Ward's body punching versus Gatti's headhunting. The best rivalries feature fighters whose styles create natural drama, personal stakes, the hatred between Ali and Frazier, the cultural pride in Barrera versus Morales, the class differences in Ben versus Eubank. Great rivalries are about more than just winning and losing. Mutual respect. Even the most bitter rivals eventually develop respect for each other. Ali and Frazier reconciled before Frazier's death. Leonard and Hearns became friends. The shared experience of elite competition creates bonds that transcend temporary hatred. Perfect timing, great rivalries happen when both fighters are at or near their peaks. The timing has to be perfect for the fights to have maximum impact. Cultural significance. The best rivalries reflect larger social and cultural themes. Ali Frazier was about civil rights and Vietnam. Leonard Duran was about American flash versus Latin American grit. These fights meant something beyond boxing. Multiple encounters. The greatest rivalries usually involve multiple fights. The back-and-forth nature of trilogies and quadrilogies allows for character development and redemption arcs that single fights cannot provide. Lasting impact. Great rivalries change the sport and the fighters involved. They create moments that define careers and eras, becoming part of boxing's permanent mythology. Conclusion: the legacy of boxing's greatest wars. These rivalries represent more than just great fights. They're the moments that define boxing as an art form. They show us what happens when skill, heart, and pride collide in the most dramatic way possible. From Ali and Frazier's trilogy to the Four Kings round-robin wars, from the Mexican Civil Wars to the modern classics, these rivalries prove that boxing at its best is about more than just athletic competition. It's about human drama, personal stakes, and the eternal struggle between two people who refuse to quit. The next time someone asks you why boxing matters, show them the thriller in Manila. Show them Leonard Hearns. Show them Ward Gotti. Show them Vasquez Marquez. Show them what happens when two fighters push each other beyond the limits of human endurance in pursuit of greatness. These rivalries didn't just entertain us, they elevated boxing from sport to art, from competition to culture, from fights to legends that will be remembered long after the last bell has rung. They remind us that boxing at its core is about the most fundamental human struggle, the refusal to quit when everything is on the line. The great rivalries teach us that sometimes the most important victories come not from defeating your opponent, but from pushing each other to heights neither could have reached alone. Ali needed Frazier to become Ali. Leonard needed Hearns to become Leonard. Ward needed Gotti to become Ward. In the end, that's what makes these rivalries eternal. They show us that greatness isn't achieved in isolation, but through the crucible of competition against someone who brings out the absolute best in you, even when you hate them for it. What's your favorite boxing rivalry? Drop it in the comments below, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into combat sports history, and let me know what other legendary feuds you'd like us to break down. Because in boxing, the greatest stories aren't just about individual fighters, they're about what happens when two warriors meet in the squared circle and create something that transcends sport itself.